Hello. So I have the pleasure to speak today with Vicki Reed. Vicki most recently was the Chief Growth Officer at FieldTrip Health. She was the former CMO of Peloton and has served in marketing roles at Nike, DKNY, and Tommy Hilfiger, among others. Vicki, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Vicki, to start things off, tell us something about yourself that nobody else would know.
Yeah, you tossed this to me ahead of time, which maybe is a good or a bad thing. But so it did. It gave me a little head scratcher moment because I thought, oh my gosh, something that nobody would know, which would mean that it's like super personal. And of course, my immediate thought went to my analyst, my therapist, and I was like, well, but there wouldn't be anything that nobody knows because that person knows pretty much everything. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe that is something that uh, uh, is interesting enough to like delve on. Is that since I went back to school to a psychoanalytic institute, part of the requirement is to be in analysis, and that's 3 times a week analysis therapy that I've been in since I've been in that program. And that has been an amazing and kind of wild journey of exploration into yourself, really deep. So not many people know that, except for, of course, all the people I'm in school with, because they all do it too.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. Is there anything you've learned about yourself that you would be open to sharing?
Mhm. Oh my goodness, so many things. I mean, what can I say? Peeling back the onion, you're constantly discovering things about yourself that you know, you didn't know, you thought you knew, you didn't know it, you thought you knew it, it was completely different, something that I could share that I didn't know. I think there's always a little bit of understanding about yourself that is not black or white. I always thought myself to be really introverted and quite quiet and bookish. And that's kind of the way I started off the first part of my life. And it's still a big part of me. But, one of the things that I have learned is that, two things can be true at one time, and I think, again, like somebody who's really, we know a lot about the Susan Cain introverted leader thing, but a person that is quiet and can be somewhat introverted also does not, can also be a leader. So these two things can be true at one time has served me true about myself, and also things that I've learned and applied to workplace ideas.
That's great. Yeah, I went on a meditation retreat. This is probably several years back now. And the first thing that they said when we went into it is that you're going to learn something about yourself this weekend. I can't tell you what, when, or how, but you
Yeah.
will. And sounds like a similar experience. And I definitely did. And it was totally unexpected as well.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
very cool,
You
though.
never know. And
Never
honestly,
know.
they can come on a daily, on a basis, on a day or a week, or you never know.
Yeah, great. So I give you a little bit of an introduction to start off with. Maybe for the listeners here that aren't familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and yourself?
Yeah, of course. Uh, I started my career working at Nike. And I really was kind of one of those like homegrown kids from Oregon that found themselves, got lucky, whatever you want to call it, at a job at Nike, at age 22. And it was not only at Nike, it was at Nike in the advertising department in the early 90s. And we were doing, and soon found myself doing everything from checking invoices for our media spends to carrying, shoes for basketball players back and forth for photo shoots, or to the designers, to the agency, and beyond. So it was an amazing experience. It really set me up for everything else that I've ever done. It also spoiled me for everything else I've ever done. Um, but it set me up on those years. And since then, I moved on from there eventually after about 8, 9 years. I've actually gone back and done a few projects for them over the years. Um, I went on eventually to do more kind of in the fitness space. I had a stint in fashion when I moved to New York for a number of years and worked for a couple of companies under the LVMH umbrella. Um, I worked for the smallest company, one of the bigger, maybe not the biggest companies. I worked for a good sized company at LVMH, and then came back a year or two later when they approached me to work for one of the smallest ones there. But it was the one that was owned by Bono and his wife, Ali. And it was the fashion company Eden, which was manufacturing with sustainable ideas out of Africa. So it was what do I want to say? I remember them telling me it's a role that's much smaller than the one that you had before, but we think that you're going to be interested. And it's hard to say no, I don't want to check this out. And it was everything that I hoped it would be. It was such a great life experience. Unfortunately, that brand is no longer in existence, but again, it's one of those segues in your life where you kind of know that it might not be financially or even the resume builder that it could have been, but it was the life enricher that you hoped it would be. So
Sure.
After that, very, very surprisingly, I knew the founder of Peloton, and they were very unknown and very early stage. And he came to me and said, I've known you for a while. You ride a bike, you worked at Nike, and you understand luxury brands. Like, you're the perfect person to come join us. I'm not sure that I really was the perfect person to come join them, but it was a wild ride during that first year. Wasn't their first year, it was my first year there. Another kind of crazy experience that set me off on really other things within the fitness industry, so this emerging space of digital fitness. It set me off on a career of very different kind of marketing. So really kind of digging in on acquisition marketing, digital, and moving on from fashion. There were so many things I thought that I knew that I realized after Peloton really didn't know at all. Giant learning curve. And it was really after that I also decided to go back to school. So, in all of that, I went back to midlife, went back to school, decided I needed not an MBA. I went back to got my master's in clinical psychology. I had been a psych major and a journalism double major in college way back when, and I had always kind of thought that, there were a couple paths out in front of me, and I took one door, and what would happen if I took another door? And I went back to explore that other door. And really ever since then, I've never taken another really permanent full-time job with a company since leaving Peloton, because I've been in school studying for a while, studying now for my licensure in psychoanalysis, but also just studying and eventually now kind of doing a lot of what I would call, people say it's consulting, I call it consulting. It's really kind of fractional CMO work, and sometimes it's very clearly a fractional CMO. I think as a longtime client, I don't always take a ton of gratification over just consulting with people. It's very hard for me not to kind of dig in and ultimately end up, helping them for a period of time, moving them to their next place, which is helping build up the department and maybe eventually kind of recruiting for the next CMO, and really everything in between.
That's great. What a great story. Lots to unpack there. Bono, did you get a chance to meet him?
Of course.
Tell me a little bit about him. What was he like?
What I will say, and I could say a lot and I could say very little, amazing. He and his wife really more worked with the company on a day-to-day basis. He of course was involved and spent lots of time with both of them over the years that I was there. Really good quality people, both of them. So solid. Maybe that's not exciting, very salacious, maybe not exciting to print, but it's true. And Yeah, I think when you speak with them, you know that you're in the presence of somebody who's very intelligent, deeply sensitive, and really hears you, sees you. In fact, to the point where he's known for doing, he can do pretty dead on imitations of almost anybody he meets within a
Oh,
short period
wow.
of time. He sees you.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, such an inspiring to see what he's been able to use his brand and
Hmm.
do so much good
Hmm.
in the world for it. So
Yeah.
very cool. Uh, I also say, as we're recording this, I believe tonight or maybe earlier this week, the Air movie is
Yes.
coming out.
I can't,
Are you
I gotta,
planning
I
to see
gotta, I
that?
gotta go
Have
check
you
that
watched
out.
any of the previews? Do you know anything about it? Is that any way
You know
accurate
what?
into what really happened?
I I don't know that much about it. I haven't talked to any really like old school Nike friends in a while to kind of get some of their scoop. It's before it takes the era of that Nike story that they're taking takes place pretty well beyond when I was there. Um, but um, but absolutely, I mean, when you see somebody like Ben Affleck playing Phil Knight, it's pretty entertaining. So I guess I'm just looking at it not with a critical eye of like, but really, and I want to be entertained. But there've been so many Nike, uh, what do I want to say, urban legends about things that it's fun to like kind of ride that now. It's so many years ago, but
Yeah. Sure, sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm a Chicago kid, so grew up watching Michael
yeah,
Jordan and
yep,
having the
yep.
shoes and a big fan of Nike in general. Shoe Dog, one of my favorite books.
Shoe Dog is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so looking forward to seeing that. Even if it's not close, it'll be entertaining,
It'll be
nonetheless.
entertaining. I don't know, but Phil Knight, I have to say, as a person, is a hard person a to capture, but also is a great man.
Mhm.
And we'll see what Ben can do with that.
Sure. Excellent. Good, good. Um, So when you started your career, you've had a very interesting career, a lot of twists and turns here.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you got lucky and landed a job at Nike. Was that the goal in college to go to Nike, or did that just happen? And could you ever see yourself back then where you're at here today?
Yeah. No, no, and no, definitely. Yeah, when I got my head turned a little bit at university. I don't know how. I must have known somebody that was in the journalism school there. It's a decently good journalism school, another good one in Chicago. Um, and and they had an advertising kind of club team that through the journalism school, and they were known for being good, and there was these competitions that they would have, and I thought that was really interesting, and I'd already been a psych major and was interested in kind of that area of research, and so I ended up doing a double major in journalism. Then my goal was never necessarily to work for Nike. Actually, it wasn't even in my thought, but I thought the world of advertising was really exciting and interesting and combined things. And I thought that I would go into research side of advertising.
Hmm.
Um, and that was really what I wanted to do. And so my little story that actually could be the story that nobody knows, very few people know, is that I really wanted to work at an agency when I graduated college. And so I went up to Portland, Oregon, and tried to get interviews at agencies. Now, I was also really quiet and really shy, and I just probably didn't interview well because I interviewed at Wieden+Kennedy for a traffic job and didn't get the job. And then like a week or 2 weeks later, right afterwards, I had been temping for a temp agency, and they called and said, "We have a job at Nike this morning. Can you go out?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I'll go. Yeah, definitely. 100% I'll go out." It could have been anywhere. It could have been in accounting, and it happened to be in the advertising department, which was a very 1% of the Nike, workforce at that point in time, very small group of people, and just never left. Yeah.
Great. So you mentioned Wyden, and we were speaking a little bit before we got on here about your relationship with agencies and how that was a very much a monogamous type of relationship with Nike and them. And so tell us a little bit about that relationship that you had with them and what that experience was like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously many years have gone by and I've thought about it before because it shapes the way that I work with agencies. They were my coworkers. They were my coworkers. And because I didn't know anything different, and because that relationship was like a monogamous marriage for some period of time, I didn't question it, and there was never of course people could come and go, and we were a client and they were our agency, but you almost forgot that when you were working on things. And I think especially if you're young, if you're 23, 24, 25 years old, and you're a coordinator, and then you're a junior manager, and then you're a manager, your account agency person is your friend and they're your coworker, and then you travel with them. And even for some years, I worked so much producing ads. I mean, we'd really just produce, because we produced so much back then, that I traveled with my account people more than I did my coworkers next door on the desks next to me when I was back in the office. Like, I knew them, and we all knew each other socially in Portland, and is still the base of a lot of the friendships that I have. So it really affects you in a way that these people are never just for hire. They're people, and I do think that I kind of go into those relationships thinking like that. It definitely did. Yeah, it absolutely affects the way I think about agency relations.
Sure, sure. Now, as we were talking, you've been working with a lot of companies that do a lot of things in-house, it sounds like, or they're more in the startup phase. Have you seen any other agencies or had any other relationships similar to the one with Wieden, or is that really a unique experience working with them? And I'll throw another kind of layer on it. Do you think was it just kind of the byproduct of working together for so long, or do they do something intentional? Do you see that maybe other agencies aren't doing to have that relationship?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that the people often said there was always something about being out in Oregon and Portland for Wieden+Kennedy that made them special. And that I think is 100% true. Like, there was a certain kind of freshness and naivety about like being an agency in Portland that had kind of like, apart from the New York City Mad Men ad scene, that kind of like allowed it to be fresh and innocent, and kind of like we just want to do the right thing, to quote Spike Lee. We just want to like get people to love this or the shoes, or to like pull on the emotional heartstrings, or to, there was just a lot of like non kind of political business oriented tension in what we were doing. And that is really so hard to recreate. And I think that is what ultimately, when we look at any kind of, we call them agencies, but company today that's offering services in this area, to try to ultimately, what I'm going to say back to kind of do the right thing, is incredibly hard in the world where, there's a lot of competing pressures, budgets, and people, and politics, and the business of the business. You kind of want to go out in the country somewhere and just say, can I just bring 3 people out in the country, and we're going to come up with a bunch of amazing ideas? And yeah, and you will, or am I going to put them in a pressure pot, conference room, with like phones dinging and other things going, and then time them to see how many ideas they can come up with? I mean, it's like two, completely, things are at odds with each other. So I think that was what makes that unique. And I think a lot of people think about how to recreate that, how to allow themselves the freedom to get to that spot in our businesses now, whether it's a CMO in-house. We do a lot of work in-house, and also within kind of the partners that we find, and how they find their own creative spirit.
Right. Yeah, always an evolution, especially in this virtual, world that we live in today. How do you hard enough to create that in a boardroom, but how do you create that when everybody's in their own living room all across the
Oh
world?
God. Yeah, that's a whole nother, like a whole nother
Yeah,
thing to tackle. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So you mentioned getting out into the country, and you've been in your career a lot of in the health and wellness type space.
Mhm.
What do you do from a health and wellness standpoint? What does your self-care routine look like?
Um, being an Oregonian and being at Nike, I mean, I wasn't a particularly sporty kid, but I'm kind of a active adult. I didn't grow up playing sports. It wasn't really something my family really kind of participated in. But going to work at Nike, again, probably another way that kind of changed me. I remember trying to jog around a track, when I was like in my early 20s, and like huffing and puffing and being able to like make one loop and then trying to add another. But I've pretty much been a runner ever since then. Um, and that's, I try to get out every day, and especially, I mean, I always was a person that, you can ask any of my neighbors, they see me out, on a regular basis, rain or shine, pretty much, not necessarily running or walking. Now I'm a big walk and talker, like this whole kind of Zooms and pandemics, like if we can do a call, if I can do a check-in one-on-one with you and we can walk and talk, that's like, that's amazing. So that is a huge part of my self-care, because getting outside, um, the sunlight and away from the computer is, I mean, for any of us that have corporate jobs, like incredibly important to our health.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. 5 o'clock hits, I'm off and going to the gym. I need to
Yeah.
get out. I need to be
Need to
outside. I need to
move.
be doing
Yeah.
something active. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that.
Absolutely.
So thinking back on your career, are there any aha moments or maybe a mistake you made that you really learned from?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say something maybe a little, maybe the one thing that I learn and continually, especially as a therapist, kind of see is, I really learned that there are no mistakes. There are very, I'm just going to say there's no mistakes, and as I look at my own things, that I'm going to say things that unhappened and unfolded in a way that maybe I didn't want them to at the time, they're just all part of the choices you've made, and when the only thing that maybe I can kick myself about a little bit is when I think I reacted badly, um, to it. And because it's inevitable, and if you're not pushing yourself, you're not going to make a mistake. And if you don't make mistakes, you're not going to learn. And so, being somewhat of a lifelong learner, it's kind of inevitable that, that you take that approach. And what I can see and translate into the world that I live in now, which is working with people in either a coaching or a therapeutic aspect, the idea of mistakes can be so damaging to people, that that idea, that harsh inner critic, is so hurtful, that I think we just need to twist the narrative on that, and really, talk about, I don't know if we need to even say the word mistake, but like, you're going to do things that work out and you're going to do things that don't work out. Oh, I know. We'll turn it into what we do now a lot at work. They're experiments. We're constantly running experiments in our life. We're A/B testing things all the time. And all we're doing is learning. It's learning.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to bring it back. Think about it in terms of experiments. Yeah, I would say the only mistake is to if you didn't learn something from it.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that would be the only mistake. So I 100% agree with that as well. Uh, so where do you go to stay on top of industry trends and news? You mentioned you're a researcher. You like books. Is that sort of how you go about it, or is there some other places you go?
Yeah. It's a good question. I don't have a really set way of getting information. I feel like it's like by osmosis. It's like music. It's like I don't really play with my Spotify until I like find a song. It's like I've just kind of listened, and somehow things like break through, and then all of a sudden you realize you've heard something before and you like it, and then you find something else and you like that too. It's a little bit like that with news. I mean, I'm still a little old school with I do the digital New York Times now. I tend to really focus on, I like Insider, Business Insider. For last year, I've been reading a lot of psychedelic like newsletters and things because that was industry specific to what I was working in. There's still a few kind of business oriented ones that I do for the fitness industry that I like. So yeah, you kind of, and of course, there's some classic kind of social media type of things, but I try not to to be honest, it's hard to like not spend too much time on digital devices doing this, because by the time you've ended your 8 or 10 hour day, you really don't want to spend any more time on that. But I tend to think that industry news, it's like you need to keep your finger on the pulse of what reaches a pop culture, because ultimately you're going to be wanting to drive whatever it is you're working on into that. Right. Ultimately. So you need to kind of understand what is happening there, as well as like some really specifics about what's happening in the industry and what's happening with either competitors or the state of the business. Really understanding, I guess I will throw this in, I spend more time now than ever before understanding economics and economy, because that is like at a senior level role. It's not just about fun ads and digital placements. It's really what's happening with people, what's happening in the bigger picture, what's happening with spending and taxes, and how is that going to affect my product. Like you really start to think a little bit like an economist.
Sure. Have you seen that evolve in more recent years, that it's becoming more imperative for the CMO to have that type of hat on, or you feel it's kind of been that way for a while now?
I mean, I think we could say that it's always been that way, but I think it's never been this volatile. So the volatility since about, again, I'd have to like think back, like of course, the farther go back you can look at it, but I'd say since about 2008-ish, like, but around before that and then into like now, like there's been so many kind of ups and downs and dips, and like and the market affects things, and we've had several boom and bust booms with the dot-coms, like it really it is a volatile, like it's volatile, and brands that used to be the Levi's of for 25, 50 years it's no longer like that before now. Trends go faster and die faster than ever before, and so the speed of which things happen, which is affected by like economic factors and psychological factors and societal factors, are incredibly important.
Yeah, it is quite amazing how fast things can come and go in this world. You almost think like, can it get any faster than it
Can it
is?
get any faster? Yeah, it can get any faster because AI will make it faster.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. So as you know, we work with a lot of agencies. You talked a little bit about your experience as a CMO. What, if you had a chance, which you do right now, to share something you wish they knew about the role, what would you share?
I think that maybe, and this could be specific to me, but I have a feeling that there's other people out there like this, that I think sometimes some agencies get assignments or think of the assignment that I want to like hand away my baby. But the reality is I don't want to hand away my baby. I want to collaborate or riff off with somebody and to develop this. And so I think in some ways they can take kind of a hands-off approach and like come to you with all this stuff. And it's not that its stuff isn't interesting or great. It's like, but it's missing the collaboration. It's missing that thing that I didn't hire you because I wanted you to actually do all the work for me. Like, I want to do some of the work as well as, like, and that's why I'm getting you there with a good brief and with everything else. But I think sometimes agencies are a little myopic about that. I'm hiring you, or I'm looking to hire you because I want you to collaborate with me. And then I want to use your resources, which are specializations that I don't have at my fingertips to do what I can, to take it further than I can. But I think I mean, I will say I've never found an agency that wouldn't do that, but I've absolutely found that sometimes I had to kind of like insert myself.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's sometimes a perception of what they expect you to want from them,
Mhm.
which it's great to hear, from you directly, that that's not always the case. I'm sure there are others that would want a
Yeah,
more,
it might be the case. It might be that it's a really hands-off relationship and it's really autonomous. But like for me, and no matter what role I've ever had, it's especially if you're doing something significant like brand level work, then like that collaboration is incredibly important.
yeah, yeah. I think it's key to just have that open communication from the beginning to understand what everybody's style is and what their expectations are, and
Yeah.
would probably get a better end product, so to speak. So yeah, that's great advice. Um, So I'm sure at brands like Nike and DKNY and Peloton, you had lots of agencies trying to get on your radar and wanted to work with you. Are there any moments or things that an agency did that really cut through and got on your radar screen?
Um, I mean, I'm just gonna say flat out, I'm probably like 6 degrees of separation from like so many people than in a lot of like amazing agencies that usually when I've needed or wanted work, it's I usually rarely ever go through any side kind of a pitch process. It's really just it's like matchmaking. It's like knowing like who might be good for this and understanding why, and then talking to people that I know or people that I know know other people that I know. um, so I'm rarely ever in the seat of kind of like waiting for someone to wow me. But I have been absolutely surprised by occasionally a person that reaches out, and it usually is through some connection of a connection, and says something incredibly relevant to me, especially about my product. And
Mhm.
especially I can say, um, in the psychedelic space that I've been in for the last year, there are people for whom this is a meaningful product. Either they've had some kind of change within themselves brought on because of it, or they've had a family member or a friend that has had mental health challenges. And then they bring that into the story, and that always gets me. And I always take the time to like have that meeting, and it absolutely, the emotional connection to what we do because of somebody's story, a real story, not a fake one, is a powerful like intro.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think, being relevant is very key. And if you can weave in some sort of personal connection there, I think it goes a long way. While yes, this is B2B, in all reality,
Yeah,
it's still humans on both sides, of the
yeah.
fence. And I think sometimes we forget that. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Any mistakes you see agencies making that you can say, hey, with your sales, marketing, or positioning, any of that that
Mhm.
that you have an opinion on?
Yeah. I mean, I will say in the last couple of years, because I've tended to work for some like not necessarily small, but smallish early stage companies, is I do think that agencies sometimes are a little myopic about budgets and what they think that they can do for a company that's everybody wants to work with the small kind of cool up and coming um, maybe startup or early stage company, but the budgets that come along with them, are tend sometimes to be really, small. And I think that's kind of, I'm always kind of shocked that it's a shock when you actually have that conversation of like, hey, we don't really have that much money to work with. Well, tell me what it is. What is it really? And then the answer is real. And then you're like, okay, now I know why. It's like, oh, okay, like that is like, budgets aren't that big of a mystery. You can guess the size of a company. You can imagine then out of that size, what size their marketing spend is, and then you can go backwards and then figure out how much of that they should really be spending on an agency fee versus like actual working money on spend. And like it's a maybe it's not a precise formula, but there is like a little pretty easy way to figure that out. And so if you're surprised, then you shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And when we're working with clients, it's the same thing. It is definitely fun and sexy to work with the hot, startup, but the budgets aren't there. And if that is, you got to understand that if you want the budget, you're probably not going to go after the hot new startup. But there's a trade-off, right? If that energizes your team and you can do really creative work, and that might then get you recognized by some of the bigger guys with the bigger budgets. But you probably in most cases, aren't going to have both. And, you just need to walk into that with that understanding, and there's not right and there's not wrong, but there should be no surprises, to your point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're coming close to time here. Are there anything that I maybe did not ask you that you wish that I did?
I do like the idea of kind of, is there a skill set of the modern or a CMO that I think about as being the integral one for success? And the first thing that came to my mind, because it was kind of one of your questions before, was something that came from some of my psychoanalytic reading, which is there's a name of a book by a famous person who studied under Freud named Listening with the Third Ear. And I don't think you need to know the theory to understand what listening with the third ear means. And, if there's any kind of continual like skill that I draw upon in everything that I do now, both in both worlds that I work in, is it's listening with the third ear. If we're gonna be, we are communications people at our heart. We're supposed to understand how to find these customers for these companies or services or brands or products for something that they want. We help develop products for people now. We do so many things, but if we can't listen with our third ear for what people want or need, or dynamics in a room, or the meaning of something, or we're helping our CEO understand how to communicate something to the company. We offer so many extracurricular activities within a company as a CMO a lot of the time. It's really kind of goes back to that core thing. We are ultimately the communicators, which make us strategists, on how to turn that into business strategies. And and if we do it, we're listeners, but a special kind of a listener that takes into what's happening on the surface level as well as what's happening underneath the surface.
Yeah, that's great. Listening with the third ear. I'll have to check that out. I love the title of that.
Yeah.
So what can we expect from you next, Vicki?
We'll see. I haven't had as I've done like a number of kind of like shorter term consulting gigs over the last couple of years. I haven't had much of a break. So as I was ending my time at FieldTrip, I kind of intentionally didn't line anything up right away. I mean, even when I'm not quote unquote working, I'm still working, going to school, finishing and have patients and other stuff. So I still am busy, believe me, but now thinking about how to kind of, I loved being in the psychedelic space. I don't know, it's a very volatile space right now. I'm not sure that that is what I exactly want to do right away, but potentially maybe thinking about things in mental health and some kind of health wellness related. So it's actually all kind of transcendent to what I've done before in the fitness space, but I'm definitely thinking about those things and new things. I always seem to have a friend or two doing something new with some company that I kind of consult on the side. But yeah, thinking about what is new in mental health, absolutely, like, is been on my mind.
Yeah, well, it's a very important area, and more prevalent now, than
Yeah,
ever. So
exactly. Since the pandemic, I mean, it has been for a long time, but absolutely in the last couple of years, it's been, a hot topic.
yeah, I feel like it's a lot more aware. It's always been there, but it's a lot more awareness around it, and it's more acceptable to talk and have those conversations.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt you'll find something, that will really inspire and help the public at large. So it's great. So where can people go to find out more about you and find out what's next in your journey?
Oh, well, maybe they just need to pay attention on LinkedIn or something. Yeah, I think that's probably it. I don't, yeah, I feel like I write so much for educational, academic reasons that I don't spend a ton of time putting it out in the world. But that might be something I can change also, and maybe something I'd like to change in the near future too.
Great. Well, Vicki, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. A couple highlights here is, do the right thing, walk the talk, right, with your clients, and I listen with a third ear. I really love that. So, Vicki, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Christian.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.